Today on CityCast Nashville, we're talking about the ins and outs of renting in Music City. With an affordable housing shortage and rising costs everywhere, finding and keeping a place can feel overwhelming. Elizabeth Leiserson, project director with the Legal Aid Society of Middle Tennessee and the Cumberlands, joins us today to help answer all your questions about renting. It's Wednesday, September 3rd. I'm your host, Marie Cecile Anderson, and this is what Nashville's talking about. What's the hardest thing about trying to rent a place in Nashville?
Hands down, I think I'm going to go with the cost.
Yep. Ding, ding.
There's just not enough affordable housing in Nashville, and the cost of living is rising faster than wages and resources.
What's the average rent for a two-bedroom apartment here?
The federal government actually collects data on what it calls fair market rents. And for our area, we actually have a fair market rent area that includes Davidson and a couple surrounding counties. But the fair market rent for a two-bedroom in Davidson and surrounding counties for 2025 is $1,827.
Whoa!
It's just out of reach for a lot of folks. It's really hard.
Yeah, let's get into it. So what are the best resources to find houses or apartments to rent here, especially for people who qualify for something affordable or subsidized?
So it's hard to find any housing in Nashville, and it's particularly hard to find subsidized housing. So one of the things that we try to do is we try to share information with people about websites and resources that do have affordable housing. The number one place I suggest folks start is the website tnhousingsearch.org. That's run by a state agency. And it has options, if you sort of dig into the advanced search fields, to look for income-based or sliding scale rent. So it is a single website where they collate the list of all the various apartment complexes that have marked themselves as accepting some form of income-based rent. A really, really valuable resource. So I always suggest folks start there. One place in Nashville that we do actually have some availability of subsidized housing is for seniors and folks with disabilities. And a lot of people aren't aware of this. So if you're 62 or over or have disabilities, there is another pot of subsidized housing that is specifically for those populations. And they, unlike sort of your basic Section 8 and public housing, which is extraordinarily hard to get into, AgeWell TN has a really good website that can send you through some of those options for subsidized and senior housing.
And then us being Music City, is there any sort of subsidized housing for musicians?
You know, that's a great question. I've never come across a resource that is specific to musicians. I do know a lot of folks end up using sort of personal networks and Facebook and sort of Nashville renters groups of various sorts. And those are wonderful resources and occasionally dangerous. And it's just really hard because the absolute best places that people will find come from that kind of link, and also the worst scams.
Ah, yes. I've encountered some scams myself. I won't get into it. It's too touchy of a subject.
Yeah, we've been there.
But how can you tell if an apartment manager or landlord is a good person to trust?
So I don't know that most people would say that lawyers are the number one person they'd go to on how to figure out who else is a good person. But I'm flattered that you would ask. Things that I think you want to look for are, number one, you want a person that you can meet face to face, like a real human being, with an apartment that you can visit, that you know exists, and you want a lease. Anyone who's trying to rent you an apartment, but for whatever reason they don't want to give you a lease, I think that's your single biggest red flag. One thing that people don't always know, you can actually look up on the property assessor's website for Davidson County who owns a property. So sometimes, unfortunately, we see people renting out houses that they don't own. Sometimes it's a sublet, for example, but the person who's subletting doesn't realize that they're subletting. So if you want to do an extra level of lawyer paranoia, go to the property assessor's website, type in the address, and see if the owner is the person you're talking to.
Okay, here's another touchy subject for myself personally, and for many. How can you tell if a potential roommate is a good person to trust?
Oh, that one's an even harder one. And my kingdom for a good answer on trusting a roommate. And when I think back to myself in my college years, and now I know about joint and several liability for your roommates, and I feel very grateful that young Liz made it through her 20s without any worse scrapes than I did. I think in a perfect world, it's somebody you already know, somebody where you have some trust about their income is going to be really important, which could be an awkward question to ask. Like, oh, do you have a job? And those are questions that are just deeply weird to have to ask when you're first meeting a potential roommate. Putting my lawyer hat on, what a lot of people don't realize about having a roommate is that if you have two people who signed a lease together, I mentioned really quickly this concept of joint and several liability, legal term, but it just means that in the end, both of you are on the hook for everything. So if your roommate leaves town, you're not just liable for your portion of rent. If you're the only one that the landlord can find, you're potentially liable for the whole thing.
I had a roommate skip town on me. And then people were showing up at the house looking for him because he owed him money.
It gets scary pretty quickly. And if I had a crystal ball, the trick with roommates, landlords, I feel like there are some things you can be on the lookout for. And roommates, you just never know because it can go wrong in so many different ways.
So what things should every renter do or check or look for before signing a lease?
So number one thing is, may go without saying, read the lease before you sign it. Virtually nobody reads their lease. But seriously, though, read your lease and get a copy of it before you sign it, and especially after you sign it. And that one right there is going to go a really long way toward understanding some of what can happen. And if they tell you some version of, you ask a question and they say, oh, don't worry about that, you may want to get that in writing because you can't orally modify a lease contract normally. Do try to do a walkthrough of the place before you sign the lease. Again, like, it can be hard sometimes. The apartment's not ready yet, or you're not sure, or they want you to put down money to hold it while they're flipping it over. And all of those things can be okay, depending on your situation. But the more information you have and the ability to actually do a physical walkthrough before you finalize the lease, really important. When you're doing a walkthrough, hopefully you're checking for repairs things. That's a moment where you have a bit more leverage to make sure that a repair actually happens. Once you're in, your landlord knows that you live there now, and hopefully they will still make repairs. They're still required to make repairs, but this is a moment when they have a lot of incentive to make sure they do it right the first time. Really important to make sure you understand not just the rent that you're going to owe, but the full amount that you're going to get charged in any given month. That involves looking into what folks call junk fees. And junk fees often live in the least read portion of your lease, which is the addenda. So read the addenda too, because there's maybe a whole list of extra fees that are going to get added on every month. And you might have fees for utilities. You might get fees for, my personal favorite, valet trash. So try to get a good idea of what the actual amount is going to be, not just the top line number.
And then how can renters protect themselves?
Couple of things. So number one, when you first move in, take pictures. Pictures are your best friend when you're trying to document things. So take pictures when you arrive, take pictures when you leave, and if there are problems, take pictures of those too. You might want to save them somewhere other than your phone if you can upload them to a Google Drive or something so that you have them in 2 or 3 years or 8 years when you move out of this apartment and you may not have the same phone anymore. That's number one. Another thing that's really important is whenever you're having really important or significant communications with your landlord, do them in writing or follow up in writing. So you call down to the property management and say, oh, hey, when do you need that paperwork from me? And they say, oh, no big deal. Anytime in the next couple of weeks is okay. Beautiful. You can take that, but send them a quick follow-up email that says, hey, it was great to talk just now. Really appreciate you all giving me the flexibility. I'm going to have those papers to you within the next 2 weeks. Let me know if you need it sooner. Thanks. A lot of folks like to record conversations they have with property management. That's fine. It's legal. Tennessee is a one-party consent state, so you can record your conversations with property management. But I personally prefer written confirmation over audio recordings because written confirmation is easier. It's easier to search for. It's easier to show to a judge if you end up in court. And it's easier to save for yourself automatically because you have a copy of the emails that you send.
What about renter's insurance? Does it really work?
Yes, get it. Now, look, not all renter's insurance is created equal, and there can be insurance scams, and those things are all real. But unfortunately, if there is something terrible that happens in your apartment, if there's a fire, if there's a flood, you are likely to end up calling legal aid and telling me this isn't fair. I lost everything I own, and my landlord says they're not going to pay for it. And not always, it depends on the circumstances, but often that's right. The thing that would pay in that circumstance is insurance. That's what insurance is for.
Do squatters' rights exist?
Not really, not in the way you're thinking. The version of squatters' rights that you have under Tennessee law is the concept of adverse possession. So if you got any lawyers listening to this, everyone is going to think of their property class in law school, because adverse possession is one of those things lawyers talk about in law school, and it doesn't happen in real life. It's basically the concept of if you live somewhere for long enough, it becomes yours. But the devil is in the details of this, and it's almost never going to be what you're thinking of. For one thing, the time periods are really long. There's a version that only takes 7 years if you have some form of title and you have been living there for 7 years. There are other versions of adverse possession that take even longer. So, short version, no, not really. We don't have squatters' rights in Tennessee. If you fully have no right to be in a place, in general, the person who does own it can actually call the police and ask to have you removed, which is a contrast from if you're a tenant. And one thing I like to always make sure that folks are aware is if you are a tenant and your landlord wants you to leave, they cannot just call the cops to make you leave, even if they think you did something really bad. Even if your landlord thinks you've destroyed the place or you've done something illegal or you've done something dangerous, they cannot just call the cops to make you leave. Squatters, yes, you can call the cops to make squatters leave. But if you call the police to make a tenant leave, that's illegal. And the tenant can actually sue the landlord for that.
Nashville has plenty of live music, but you are missing out if you've never experienced Musician's Corner in Centennial Park. It's unlike anything else in town. First off, it's a 16-year-old multi-genre concert series that's absolutely free. Plus, it's pet-friendly, has a kids' activity area, and you can pull out a blanket, grab a bite, and hear some of the finest musicians from Nashville and beyond. Musician's Corner takes place every single Friday in September from 5 to 9 p.m. with live music, food trucks, artisan vendors, craft beer, wine, cocktails, and more. Check out performances from Parker Millsap, Lachlan Strings with Amanda Shires, Cedric Burnside, Ron Gallo, and so many more. It's produced by the nonprofit Centennial Park Conservancy and supported by CityCast Nashville. Visit musicianscorner.com for the full lineup. I would love to know, what laws do other states have that we do not?
Lots. So Tennessee law, by and large, is not super protective of tenants. So 3 laws that people often think we have in Tennessee and we don't. Some surprises in here. Is it fair, Marie, if I quiz you a little bit?
Oh, schmo, I'm scared.
Do you think you have a right to withhold rent under Tennessee law if your apartment is like trash, your landlord's not repairing it?
Yes.
Can you just choose not to pay rent?
Yes.
That's wrong.
Okay.
Under Tennessee law, you have to keep paying rent even if your landlord isn't making repairs. There's a really narrow exception if your landlord isn't providing utilities where you can withhold the cost of fixing the problem. But even then, you can't just withhold rent. Another one, do you think in Tennessee there's a right to expunge or seal eviction cases?
Oh, I hope so.
Alas, no.
Oh, no.
So a lot of states have protections that let you, if you've previously been evicted and you're worried that now you're going to apply and this eviction is on your record, it's a public filing and a future landlord might see it. A lot of states have provisions that let you either seal or expunge at least some eviction cases. For example, ones that were dismissed, ones where you sort of won in the end, or ones that are over a certain age, more than however many years old. And we don't have that system in Tennessee. And then The guessing game is probably getting old now, so you can probably guess what the answer is for this one. But if you're a tenant and you were late on rent, but you have all the money now, in Tennessee, does your landlord have to take it and let you stay?
Uh-oh.
No, I'll say for the most part, landlords will do that. So if you're behind on rent, absolutely do talk to your landlord, try to pay. Most landlords would rather take late rent than have to bear the cost of flipping an apartment. But you don't have a full right to get caught up on rent. It's called like a right to redemption, which exists in some states, where some states will have laws that say up until the time there's a court judgment against you, or up until the time you get put out, if you have all the money you owe, you have the right to pay and stay. And in Tennessee, it's always a negotiation. Okay, one more we'll do in quiz format, because Marie, I'm sure, wants to be the one answering questions. How many days notice do you think you get before your landlord can take you to court if you're behind on rent in Tennessee?
Is it 10?
The most common answer is actually going to be none.
What? Oh, no.
And it depends. So if you live in subsidized housing, for example, federally subsidized housing, you usually have 30 days notice in some counties in Tennessee, because our landlord-tenant law actually changes county by county in Tennessee. In Davidson County, though, here in Nashville, if you're late on rent, you're supposed to get a 14-day notice unless there are magic words in your lease that say you waived notice for non-payment. This is why you read your lease, because if you waived notice for non-payment, your landlord doesn't have to give you any notice at all before they go to court. You have a 5-day grace period. So if rent's due on the 1st, you have 5 days to pay. And on day 6, they can go straight to court.
This isn't making me feel so great about renting in Tennessee.
It can be hard for renters in Nashville.
Because of your role at Legal Aid, you're not allowed to lobby for changes to tenant protection laws. But what organizations can listeners follow if they want to work for change?
So Legal Aid, my job is to help individual people, not to do the sort of big lobbying around legal changes. There are organizations in town that don't have those requirements. So one, the Nashville Hispanic Bar Association. Nashville has a renters union. They're called Renters Union Nashville. They can do that kind of organizing and lobbying work. And there are other groups that are working around issues that affect renters and other people. So, for example, the Tennessee Immigrant and Refugee Rights Coalition, TIRC, they do some advocacy work around, for example, immigrants and refugees, many of whom are also renters. So they do some work at that sort of intersection of rental housing and immigration.
All right, let's go back to a tough landlord-roommate situation. If someone is dealing with these two, what's the first thing they should do?
May depend a little bit on exactly what your landlord or your roommate has done. You want to spin out a little bit more detail into your hypo for me? I'm going to make you sound like what sort of thing do you think your landlord or your roommate might have done?
Well, what if, okay, I'll give a real situation I had with a roommate, total stranger off the internet. I had a roommate who was subletting her room, so got a total stranger in there. This stranger didn't tell me, but she had ACL surgery and then had to just be in my apartment for 6 straight weeks and started making keys of my apartment for all of her friends to come visit at all hours of all day long.
Oh, no, Marie.
What would I have done?
Yeah.
Nothing. That's what I did.
Man.
Nothing. I just waited it out and then changed my locks, of course.
Honestly, I think waiting and changing your locks when she was gone might have also been my legal advice. The trick with a lot of roommate issues in particular is that it's not illegal to be like a bad person. And in the end, we all kind of prefer it that way because like we don't actually want to live in a world where you can get sued for being inconsiderate. You don't want a judge to be deciding what counts as like who's doing which chores in your house. That's not actually what we want to do. So often in that kind of case, my advice is going to be, number one, read your lease. Because when is your lease up? Because it's often in those cases, the first thing you're going to be looking toward. And in a lot of cases, the really fundamental tenant protection is the right to leave. What I always like to remind people is you are a free person. Your landlord's not allowed to require you to stay anywhere. Your roommate's not allowed to require you to stay anywhere. They can't trap you in your apartment. That would actually be illegal. What we're always talking about in that situation is money. Like, how much is it going to cost to get you out of that scenario? So we talked before, you don't have a right to withhold rent under Tennessee law, but if your landlord's not making repairs, you actually do have a right to break your lease without paying penalties. A roommate situation, whether you could break your lease for that, would probably depend on the circumstances, but it's worth talking to your landlord. Hey, can I get out of this lease? Can we remove me from the lease? Can you leave just my roommate with the torn ACL and all of her best friends on the lease and not me? And at the risk of going dark here, I work at Legal Aid. We deal with a lot of violent and abusive situations. So a thing I like to mention so that folks are aware, you can get orders of protection against roommates. So if you have a roommate who makes you feel physically unsafe or who's hurt you or has threatened to hurt you, that's a basis to get an order of protection. Good place to start in Nashville is the Family Safety Center, which runs out of the police department. They have a walk-in office on Murfreesboro Road, so you can talk to them about your rights to get an order of protection.
If someone is listening and they're a renter and they may not be able to afford a lawyer themselves, where would you recommend they start?
I mean, I'm a little biased, but Legal Aid's always a good place to call. Legal Aid is free. We do have income limits, so we can, for the most part, help people who can't afford a private attorney, but give us a call, and sometimes we can help people, even if you think you might not qualify for legal aid. For renters in particular, we can go all the way up to 400% of the poverty line, which covers something like 90% of renters in Davidson County. We're not going to be able to take every case, but we will do our best to at least point you in the right direction, give you a resource or an idea of a person who might be able to help.
What first drew you to renter advocacy here in Nashville?
So I'm a rare bird. I'm a Nashville native. And it was always really clear to me when I was in law school that I wanted to do this to help regular people. And I do think housing is a human right. And being able to do this advocacy here in my home means a lot to me. And I'm so pleased and happy and proud and inspired by all of the work happening around housing in Nashville. You asked me before about other organizations that are doing great work on housing, and I listed a few, but there are so many more. Nashville Organizing for Action and Hope cares a lot about housing. They do wonderful work. Stand Up Nashville cares a lot about housing, does amazing work there. I could go, Conexión Américas does it. There's so many groups in so many different parts of town that care so much about this work. And there is a lot of support for it. All the way up to the mayor, there's an idea that we need to address this. And I find a lot of hope in doing an issue, even where it's kind of bleak and I tell you to guess what the law is and it's always worse than you think it might be. There's a lot of hope and a lot of will and a lot of interest in trying to keep Nashville a place where folks can live.
Do you think renters get enough say in the way that the city is run?
I mean, so the thing about renters is all of us are many things. And most people don't identify as a renter first. If you ask, like, who are you or what are the issues that you care about, maybe you say first that you're a parent or that you're an immigrant or maybe it's your job. And those are the things that you think about first is what you are. There are so many renters in Davidson County. There's tons. And there is a lot of interest in our city council in supporting renters, in helping them. The trick with a lot of renters is they're just not organized. And organizing isn't Legal Aid's particular bucket. We represent individual people. But there are groups in town that do that kind of organizing work. And I think it's a matter of tenants feeling comfortable calling themselves renters and figuring out what are the changes that they need, because we have so many people who are living paycheck to paycheck. But a lot of people who get evicted, the first thing they tell me is they never thought they'd be here. They never thought they were going to be in this position. So you never thought to advocate around these issues because they weren't ever your issues until they are.
All right. So read your lease, get everything in writing. Liz, this has been really wonderful. Thank you so much for talking with us today.
My pleasure.
That's all for today here on CityCast Nashville. And don't forget, you can support this show and get great perks by becoming a CityCast Nashville neighbor at membership.citycast.fm. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell your friends, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our Hey Nashville newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Toodles!